Morning everyone, and thanks for coming along to today's AGEC meeting. I've got a few apologies for absence. Councillors Ash, Brown, Butters, Wilcox and Tucker can't make it today. So we have some very able substitutes, which we'll introduce everyone in a minute. And James Mason, the independent person, can't make it either. Moving straight on to emergency evacuation procedures, I'll pass over to Angie.
Thank you, Chair. There is not expected to be a fire alarm today, so if the alarm does continuously ring, your fire exits are, it's a bit like air hostess, are that side and that side depicted in the green, and then just follow me and I'll take you to the designated area.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. I don't have any. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, that's fine. We have no public access statements received before the meeting today. So we'll move straight on to agenda item 5, Chair's business. So I'm just confirming that this AGEC meeting is taking place as a face-to-face meeting, but we are recording this meeting for the public to view, whereas before COVID, committee meetings were not recorded. So I'll just get the councillors to introduce themselves first. I'm Councillor Goggin, representing Hartcliffe and Widdywood in Bristol. If I go this way round.
Yes, good morning. Councillor Shelley Bromley for Western and Bath and North East Somerset.
I'm Robert Payne, Councillor for Western-super-Mare Central, North Somerset Council.
Councillor Don Davis, North Somerset.
And now we'll get the, we've just had another arrival actually. It's Councillor Monk. But I'll get the officers to introduce themselves now, and I'll go around in the same direction, starting to my left.
Good morning, I'm Amanda Brown, I'm the clerk to Avon Fire Authority.
Good morning, I'm Caroline Taylor, Head of Corporate Assurance, Continuous Improvement and Planning.
Good morning, Steve Quinton, the Temporary Area Manager responsible for risk reduction.
Morning, Vicky Gould, Internal Audit Manager, RSM.
Good morning, I'm Angie Feeney and I'm the Director of Corporate Services here at Avon Fire and Rescue Service.
Thanks everyone. Adam, are you ready to just introduce yourself?
Good morning, my apologies for being late. I'm Adam Monk, I'm a councillor from South Gloss.
No, and thank you for substituting at late notice as well. Okay, the voting procedures. I will ask members for any votes against, any abstentions, and then a show of hands for all other members voting for. If I could just remind people to use their microphone when speaking, so it's picked up for the recording, and then if you can remember just to press the button to turn them off as well. So moving on to agenda item 6, which is the minutes from the last meeting. I don't have any corrections. Does anybody have any corrections or amendments to them? No, that's brilliant. Okay, well I'll move that they are an accurate record of the meeting. May I have a seconder? Thank you, Don. All those in favour? Show of hands. Of course. In fact, I don't think anyone was here at the last meeting other than myself, so I'll vote for anyway. And we'll move on to, I'll sign them and pass them to Emma after the meeting. We'll move straight on to agenda item 7, which is the update on internal audit recommendations. And Caroline will be presenting on that one.
Chair, just before we do that, I think I'm going to release Councillor Don Davis to leave because he's not feeling very well and we now quorum without him. So thank you, Don.
Yeah, thanks for coming in anyway, Don, and I hope you feel a bit better soon.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and morning members. So this report is for noting. If I can ask members to turn to page 16, Appendix 1. The summary table gives you the information on the progress against the 2020-21 internal audit plan, where we had 36 actions that were identified as a result of the 2021 internal audit plan. 25 are now complete. 3 actions have been superseded. 7 are on track, but not yet due for completion. And 1 risk management action has requested an extension, which was approved at the service leadership team meeting in August. We also, on the same page in the table below, have an update on the 2021-22 internal audit plan. In total, there were 51 actions, 34 have been completed, 15 actions are on track, and 2 have requested an extension that again was approved by the service leadership team at the May meeting. Turning now on to page 17. Appendix 2, this section will give you a report of the progress against those actions that were identified in the 2020-21 audit plan, which are still open. Likewise, on page 21, which is Appendix 3, this gives you a summary of progress against those actions from the 2021-22 audit plan that are still open and where extensions have been approved by the service leadership team. This update does not include the latest actions to come out of the recent protection audit, which Vicky from RSM will provide members an update on after my presentation, as this audit was finalised too late for inclusion into this report. An update on the new 2022 and 23 audit actions will be included at the next AGET meeting. In terms of the 2020-21 information in the appendix, to note that the 1 extension is the combined risk management follow-up actions which have been superseded. And it's also worth noting there's been 2 actions completed from 2021 plan since the last AGET meeting, and this includes a DICE, which is Diversity, Inclusion, Cohesion and Equality action, and it includes business continuity planning action. Worth noting from the 21-22 section of the appendix, the 2 extensions from the 21-22 plan offer 1 fleet action, which is relating to the new Tran9 system being implemented, and 1 training action for driver training. It's also worth noting that since the last AGET meeting, 4 actions from the 21-22 plan have been completed. These are from the transformation audit, and all 4 actions from this audit have now been completed and closed. So that's my update on this report. So unless members have any questions, as stated earlier, this report's just for noting and to provide members with information on how we're progressing against implementing our actions from the audit plans.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Very good. I don't have any questions. Do other members have any questions? No? Okay, well, that report is just for noting. So we will note that and move on to agenda item 8, which is the internal audit updates and reports. And I think Vicky's going to present on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So our first report I will take you through is our progress report. So this just sets out where we are with delivery of the 22-23 internal audit plan. So we've completed and finalised 1 audit report, and that's the protection audit that we'll discuss shortly. And we've completed the field work of the business case and benefits realisation advisory review, and the draft report is in progress, so that will come to the next meeting. Some updates on the original plan that was agreed earlier in the year, in that the pensions work is unlikely to happen this year due to all of the changes going on there, and the corporate reporting review has been deferred for now because there is a further peer review of governance arrangements going on. So those have come out of our internal audit plan and been replaced by the operational assurance audit, and then we have a few days kind of left over to use as contingency if anything arises during the year. We have in the last few days agreed to do some additional work with the finance team to walk through some new processes that they're implementing to look at how they're managing risk, so we're using some of those days for that. The plan is on track to be delivered by the end of the year, as you can see in section 2, and then appended to the progress report is also a benchmarking report which summarises the performance in terms of internal audit assurance opinions and actions from last year compared to our emergency service clients across the country. So I don't know, I've skipped over the report as the paper was behind the detailed report, but if there's any questions on the benchmarking, I'll take that now as that links through to our progress report really. But it just shows how you compare in terms of the number of medium, high, low actions that we raised across our emergency services clients and also the different assurance levels. So for example, you were above average in terms of 3.2% of our emergency services clients had a minimal assurance opinion last year, whereas Avon Fire didn't have one, which is a good thing because that's our most negative assurance opinion. You were in line for partial, ahead on reasonable, which is a positive, but just below on the substantial assurance. But I won't go into more detail on the benchmarking, but I'll take any questions on that one before I go into the protection report.
Thank you, Vicky. And that part in your papers, councillors, is from page 57. We've sort of skipped ahead if you want to know where the benchmarking is. Do we have any questions on that at all? No? It's all very quiet today. So we could move on to the protection one now,
sure.
I think. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the first audit of the 22-23 internal audit plan, and this audit links through to the service plan and one of the key objectives around protection and the new risk-based inspection programme around fire safety and businesses across Avon. So this was looking at how the organisation is setting up those risk-based inspection programmes, how they're delivering the audits, the training of the staff involved, how businesses and premises are categorised in terms of risk, and then also that kind of the closing the loop of action tracking of any actions that come out of those audits, and then any reporting, either national reporting or internal reporting. So that was the scope of the review. And actually positive assurance opinion with only a few actions raised. One around what we call a directive control, so how your staff that are responsible for undertaking these audits know what's expected of them, and so that you know that the right processes are happening and that's happening consistently. Obviously there's training and there's other policies in place, but there was just an action around formalising documentation and guidance to make sure that there's consistency across the process, and that links to another action where we just found that some of the action tracking processes from the audits were inconsistent practices. But that isn't saying that action tracking wasn't happening, it just wasn't as consistent as would be expected. And then there was one action around performance reporting. There's a new performance metric around these risk-based inspection programmes on the performance dashboard, but at the time of audit that hadn't gone all the way through from SLT to PRSC, but that is now on there, so that was just a bit of a timing issue. And we're also aware that there's a new kind of performance monitoring process going through SLT, which we've looked through. This performance is on track, so we don't want to dwell on that too much, but if it wasn't to be on track, then hopefully the new SLT performance monitoring process would pick that up and dive into the whys and what we're going to do about it. But I don't know if Steve wants to come in and add any more detail or answer any questions on that one.
No, I think Vicky's explained the process. I'm happy to go into any more detail around what the risk-based inspection programme is, if members require that. But actually very reassured that my team and my managers are working very well, and credit to themselves. We have introduced we will be introducing very shortly an improved, enhanced risk-based inspection programme. It will further support what Vicky's identified, but happy to take any questions or expand further if members wish.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Vicky. And it's good to hear that it's positive. Obviously, it's picked up a couple of things, but they're being addressed, so that's very promising.
Steve, I just wondered, it might be worth just doing a very quick summary of what that inspection programme is, only because I'm just conscious that we've got members here that we don't normally have at AJEC, so I think it would be quite useful. Just a really short summary. I'm sorry, I hope that's okay.
No, that's fine. No, and I'll try and keep it short, so nod at me, because I'll go on for hours, as you know, Amanda. Every fire and rescue service is required to have a risk-based inspection policy. Our challenge, and the other 42 fire and rescue services, is that everybody slightly defines risk differently, which is quite bizarre in one respect. So the National Fire Chiefs Council are carrying out a piece of work to define risk nationally, which will help us. What we're comforted by is that the work we've put into our refined risk-based inspection is very much aligning to what that national work is likely to come up with and produce. So therefore, if any changes are needed, we're not too far away. Her Majesty's Inspectorate back in 2018 picked up on the fact that we needed to refresh our risk-based inspection programme, and on our own self-assessment we identified that. So one of our station managers and my fire safety manager have spent a considerable amount of time refining the actual methodology and the algorithm around how we identify risk, which was outside the scope of this audit. And then obviously then there's the progress that sit behind that. So I have a responsibility to ensure that on behalf of the organisation we are inspecting the highest risk premises within the 4 unitary areas. Now in reality that currently sits around the likes of high-rise residential buildings, as we know, and some members will be aware I've given updates previously in other areas around Grenfell. So that's a considerable piece of work. And then there's also the link to care homes and vulnerability. They are deemed as high risk as well because of the occupancy type. So the purpose of the algorithm is to identify a real-time live system that effectively says, as of this moment, these are your top highest risk premises based on this particular category. Therefore, that should be directing our fire safety officers. Because clearly where, and it's bizarre, but a school, for instance, wouldn't necessarily be classed as high risk because it's well managed, it's under the local authority, there's lots of teachers there. So whereas actually care home is vulnerable because of vulnerable people, and we know high-rise buildings and cladding and such. So this has been refined. It's now a live document which will further ensure that we are inspecting that. And obviously what I have a responsibility, as I say, is to ensure that we're doing that and report that back to SLT and be held accountable to make sure I have sufficient resources to be able to carry out that risk-based inspection programme. But as I say, credit to my station manager, Carl Venn, and station manager, Mark Watson, that have produced this new system. Mark's done the technical bits, but I would say acknowledge their input into that have put us as an authority in a good position, I think, both locally and nationally with the National Fire Chiefs Council. So.
Thanks, Steve. I've just got a couple of questions coming out of that. You said the fire chiefs are preparing a report or a framework. Do you know when that's likely to happen?
I'd like to say about 12 months ago, but we envisage something within the next 12 months. But as I say, I'm comforted and can assure members that what we are producing, because we're part of those working groups and discussions, we're aligned as best we can to at the moment, unless suddenly something comes in with a curveball, but hopefully within the next 12 months.
You mentioned about the high-risk premises and visits to them. I mean, are they all on track, and are we managing to do all of those?
Yes, we are. So obviously I always like to come to my boss and say I need more staff. So there is an element around the algorithm of how we determine risk and what level of risk we're prepared to hold. Because clearly I can't inspect, my team of 24 officers cannot inspect all those premises within a certain time period. So the algorithm now says roughly within 12 to 18 months. And that's a risk that I think we're comfortable as an organisation to hold, because otherwise we'd never have enough staff. But yes, my team are actively, as the audit showed, in carrying out those inspections of high risk. Our challenge is we still have work that is still required of us by central government through the Home Office. So the building risk review that we've done previously has sort of out-trumped and impacted on our risk-based inspection programme. And again, I think it's important that members understand that, because additional work that we're being asked to do centrally will impact on local delivery. Again, through reporting through the senior leadership team, if our high-risk premises inspections have dropped, there will be a reason for that, and I will report that back through. But certainly, my boss, Assistant Chief Officer Imrie, is well aware of the impacts that it could have when we are asked to do stuff that comes in sideways.
Brilliant, thanks. And just one final bit. In Bristol, we're getting a lot more HMOs now. Do they count as high risk depending on, the type of occupancy, for example?
Yes, so we work closely with the local authority housing departments. We do have a West of England protocol, which is currently just being refreshed, and that determines what level of response we give, but also importantly, which organisation leads, because unfortunately what has shown through the Grenfell and the fallout of that is you have the same building can be subject to 3 different parts of legislation, which is a nonsense, and they're trying to resolve that, because my team will inspect the common areas and the front door, but we can't go into the flat. And that's housing, and then there's a conflict. So, but we do work closely with them, and as I say, we have this protocol, so we're well versed in that. But yeah, HMOs are a challenge to us. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll open that. Okay, Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, when you're trying to inspect the high-risk buildings which are poorly managed, is it sometimes a challenge to get the people who are running the buildings to cooperate with you, and therefore is it difficult to get the inspection in that way?
The regulator's code ensures that we should coach to comply, so we don't like to go in heavy-handed straight away, but absolutely we will do if we need to. So the legislation under the fire safety order allows us to request certain documentation or visit premises, and we can ask that by law. Where we don't get cooperation, or they are poorly managed, then we obviously have the certain articles and legislation to be able to enforce. And where we do find deficiencies, and if that deficiencies are just through lack of knowledge or understanding, then absolutely we will coach and we will support. If it's a blatant disregard for fire safety, then we will prosecute, and obviously any prosecutions we carry out, we liaise with our legal team, with the clerk to get authority, and then we proceed with prosecutions, and members will know through various papers where we have successful prosecutions. But thankfully, I think because of the publicity, the challenges and the ongoing review from Grenfell and Hackett, businesses and people are more cooperative now, I would say. So,
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions? Councillor Monk.
Hi, thank you. So I understand everything I've been told, but the process seems to be reliant on partners to input to you. So, for example, what I mean by that is if there is a new care home, just randomly, you need to be advised there is a new care home being built or converted or whatever it is. So what triggers do you have in place to ensure that your risk register is truly reflecting the current risk? I can't think of it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely, yes. So the technicalities around the risk-based inspection programme is it uses a thing called address-based premium, so it's got a unique premises ID number. And effectively that comes from Land Registry and, I want to say, the gazetteer, which is what control we use for addresses as well. So if there is a new address created, that will be inputted into that. But again, we will also pick up any changes in use or new builds through building regulations. We are a statutory consultee under building regulations. And again, obviously working with local authority housing. And often what we do find, and we were very successful a few years ago around by Bristol Airport, for instance, where we just got in a car, drove around, made a note of lots of care home, B&Bs, for instance, and then programmed inspections, because some do pop up under the radar. So I'm assured that there's enough mechanisms in place that we don't miss any new builds.
So that's great. So then just picking up on Paul's comment earlier about the HMOs. So I don't think you have a good answer for this, and I don't mean that in any derogatory way. So we also have a problem with HMOs where I live. But what has come to light recently is that residents are also converting garages that are unlicensed. So therefore, given they're unlicensed, you're not likely to be aware of them. So is there anything in place that when the local authority becomes aware of a building being used inappropriately, that then you were made aware of that as well for your risk register?
The challenge we have there is that I have no legal jurisdiction in somebody's private home, as you know. So if we're made aware of it and it's on private land, then it's a challenge for us. But we are made aware of it by our local authority partners, primarily because there's a risk there. So from an operational response perspective, we need to know if somebody's living in a garage. Now, obviously, if they do declare it as an unlicensed HMO, then effectively it could become a business, effectively. Then we do have legal jurisdiction, so there we can then go in. And on that, we have the ability to prohibit a premises instantly, whereas through the Housing Act, that can take a bit of time. So again, we are often used in the right way, not inappropriately, to ensure that premises are prohibited a lot quicker. But yes, that is a challenge, but operationally our crews are trained and will receive further training over the next 12 months in fire safety. So again, anything that they identify through home fire safety visits or through operational incidents, they feed that back into the team and then the team will investigate. So, but yeah, we'll not always know, unfortunately. But, you know, we yeah.
So, given that you're proactively monitoring risk, and that's reported back to here, but is that reported any further down the line in terms of the authority? So, the risk is monitored and it comes to here, but is that reported that, so I'm thinking more of an enforcement route, that through proactive monitoring, that actually we've identified, I mean, there's thousands of risks, but there are 20 risks we've identified where we've had to take immediate action to cease activity. Does that make sense? Because that would be a headline figure that everyone in the authority, I would think, would be interested to know, but also probably should be reported in the public domain just to demonstrate proactive activity.
So we report, obviously, externally to the Home Majesty Inspectorate and through the Home Office stats every year. Obviously, any work that goes through the prosecutions, then obviously we have, and we do update Fire Authority, the main Fire Authority with an update. Whilst at that point, it's not necessarily a lot of detail at that time, we do obviously just say we have an ongoing prosecution related to this. And then following the conclusion of that, then we provide a much more fuller report because it's then in the public domain. But in relation to, if we've identified, as you say, 20 risks in a certain area, whilst we'll identify that within the team, share that with our partners, we don't routinely report that further unless obviously it causes public interest. So e-scooters, for instance, and lithium batteries, then we are proactive in that way, and that is, it comes to members' sort of views and support. So, but yeah, not routinely if there's an area, but it's something we can certainly look at. It would just be, I suppose, the value of what that does, because happy to provide those reports if needed.
I also think that Steve's team works very closely with the unitary authorities throughout. So when we get to that prosecution stage and I'm consulted as the authorities lawyer, then sometimes they provide evidence for those prosecutions. So there is very close working relationships going. So I would imagine the information you're talking about is shared as part of all of that, but it's whether it filters down to elected members in the way you're suggesting. I'm not sure, because I don't know what reports you receive.
So, just from a point of view of a public perception, I think not many people are Googling at night what legal action is my local authority taking, so on and so forth. But it would be, I think, a really good thing to record because it shows proactive activity and it's a reinforcement of what the authority is doing. And so I would think, and so I am the comms team champion, so I'll pick that up with them separately. But that would be, I just think, a really positive message to show, because people really rate the fire authority as a generalisation, but actually if they hear of the proactivity, so maybe it's more of a comms issue, but the proactive approach, I think that
Steve can probably fill in the gaps, but I'm confident we do that already. And as Steve said, so as soon as proceedings are issued, there are public court documents available. But obviously we wait for the trial to run its course. So if there's a conviction, we definitely release press releases and so on about that.
I think there's certainly, it wouldn't be, we can produce reports from our CFMA system that can be shared if necessary, and I can certainly work with Amanda and Angela on what we can do there. I think in relation to risk, obviously every year, and we do refresh our community risk management profile that identifies our generic risk across our area, and we refresh that every year in line with the service plan. But certainly if there are trends that we identify, we can certainly look in that way, but where we can release information, then we certainly do, because it works to our advantage as well that we get the member support and local authority support.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, I mean, I remember the press coverage of the warehouse where the Voy scooters was stored, and making public aware of that. And as you say, it's the battery technology now, isn't it? And you have to completely immerse the batteries to put them out or something now, is that it?
Yes, that's correct. Lithium batteries are as safe as they have always been. It's just, and I've gone on record saying they are safe. It's just how we look after them, like any battery, really, like a mobile phone or a laptop. Don't cover it over because it will get hot. But yes, to fully extinguish them, they have to be immersed in water for a considerable period of time. And again, that also then presents a challenge. What we're now doing proactively, I suppose, in one respect, is ensuring that businesses are aware of that. People like Voy and all the unitary authorities, including the West of England, making sure that when they licence and support these new schemes, because we absolutely support this way of travel, that these companies have sufficient procedures in place to make sure they know what they should be doing in case of an emergency. And we work closely with a number of them. And again, so I suppose that's that proactiveness where we've identified a risk. But yes, new technology is not a local issue to us. There is a national working group identifying that.
Thanks, and I'm enjoying having your expertise here, so I'm just going to ask one more, if you don't mind, about new technologies, and obviously electric cars, high capacity charging points, that kind of thing. I mean, I'm presuming it's presenting new challenges all the time with different types of batteries and et cetera, and also the possibility of hydrogen fuel cells and all sorts.
Yep, so with my two hats on here as a protection lead and obviously a response officer as well, they present two challenges. So we're very much proactive through our risk-based inspection programme and obviously the audit itself. The audit questions now contain a lot more questions around such things as where is your risk assessment, because you've now got all these premises charging electric vehicles, how they charge and what the procedures are. And then operationally, absolutely, we've had to identify and carry out additional training, initially through e-learning. Obviously, instructors go away to the Fire Service College, they get a greater degree of learning, and then that's disseminated through to ensure that when we do turn up to these incidents, we know what we should and shouldn't do. And obviously, we do have hazmat advisors as well as part of the Flexi cadre. I'm in the other specialism of fire investigation, the better one, but the hazmat officers, they are specially trained, so they will come out to any incident involving something like that and provide advice to those crews and obviously the other officers. So it's an emerging world. We have to change and adapt, but obviously what comes with that is increased demand on what we do. But enjoyable in one respect, but very nervous in another. So.
Thanks. Yeah, I suppose it's a lot more difficult to completely immerse a car in water than it is a scooter.
Yes, and that's a challenge that nobody really knows what to do with at the moment, because then who takes ownership of it once it's in the middle of the highway? So thankfully, again, we work very closely with the police and the local authority, because once we've done our bit, we then leave. So, yeah.
And thanks, Steve, and I won't ask any more, I promise. Any other questions at all? Right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve and Vicky, for presenting this. And these reports are just to consider.
So I think we take that as just noting the reports, it's fine.
Yeah, so we'll move on to agenda item 9.
Thank you.
Which is, the draft annual government statement, and that's you, Caroline. Thank you.
So yes, I'd like to present the annual government statement for 2021-2022. This is a decision paper where members of the committee are asked to approve the draft annual government statement. Each year we are required to produce an annual government statement to comply with the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015. The annual governance statement sets out how the Fire Authority will comply with these regulations and will ensure that high levels of governance are provided across the organisation. The annual governance statement is written to provide a clear assessment of how the governance framework has operated over the past financial year. If I can take you to section 7 on page 82. You will see that this section provides the Head of Internal Audit's opinion, and you will see that they have given the opinion that the service has an adequate and effective framework for risk management, governance and internal control. If you then look at the next page of the report, on page 83, you will see that sections 8.2 and 8.3 will need to be updated with the external auditor's opinion on the financial statements and on how we provide value for money when their work has been completed, which is due shortly. In paragraphs 8.4, I just think it's worth noting and reminding members that the internal audit carried out last year on the review of financial controls focused on devolved budgets, and that also provided a reasonable assurance opinion with only 4 low-level recommendations. If you turn to page 84 and have a look at the conclusion, members are to be aware that we have carried out an annual review of effectiveness in July 2022 against the sit for solace principles of good governance, where managers, heads of service and statutory officers have been asked to evidence how good governance is being demonstrated in our authority. And on the basis of that annual review of effectiveness and the evidence provided, we consider that the governance arrangements are adequate and effective. Also on page 84, you will see under section 10, paragraph 10.2, that the annual governance statement will need to be signed by the chair of the authority, the chief fire officer, the treasurer and the clerk. Moving on to page 89, appendix A. Here you will find a summary of the findings of the annual review of effectiveness that we carried out, where there is a breakdown in this appendix under each of the 7 sit for solace principles of how we have supporting evidence to support that we're adhering to the sit for solace principles of good governance, with further details on the actions we implemented in the last financial year of 2021-22 to further strengthen our governance arrangements, and details of the improvements we've got planned for the current financial year of 2022-23 to strengthen further. The SIT for Guidance recommends that a copy of the annual review of effectiveness is published on our website. So once the annual governance statement is approved, that is something I will ensure happens, and that Appendix A is also published separately on our website. So really that concludes my presentation, unless members have any questions.
Thanks, Caroline. And you said that 8.2 and 3 will be completed shortly. What are we talking?
I understand it's to be the end of September. I don't know if Angie's got a further update on the external audit.
So the final accounts, you've seen the draft ones and the draft statement functions previously, but they are due to come back to the next meeting, which will be in November. The value for money process is a bit of a longer kind of process, so that will probably come to you at your following AGM. But November is when the final accounts are due to come to you.
Thanks, Angie. Do members have questions? Adam?
Thank you. So I've read that and that all makes sense. The statement from the internal auditor which refers to they feel it's adequate, so that all makes sense. I could be wrong, so if I am wrong, please tell me I am. But I understand that internal audits have to be audited themselves, for want of a better expression, for how effective they are. It doesn't state, when I glanced through this, when that was last concluded, and I'm sure it's within a time frame, but would it not be good practice to say when there was a review of the audit process last carried out, to offer further reassurance over the effectiveness of the governance? Because the comment from the internal auditor, there's nothing to validate, apart, I'm not saying they're not capable of their job in any way, but there's nothing to validate that that's deemed professionally to be, I think I'm trying to make. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So obviously internal audit is brought in by Avon Fire and Rescue Service. So we're an external organisation, and in 2021 we were audited by Deloitte and given the highest effectiveness. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
But we in the audit.
I even knew that. Part of that to renew the contract.
And the only other comment I would make, I haven't actually seen that in an annual governance statement before, but I am looking to do some benchmarking on how others do their annual governance statements. So that I've noted that, and that's something I will look out for.
Yeah, I'm not sure if other people do, but there is, it's just to kind of validate the opinion.
there is in the audit plan, there is a section around our compliance with standards, and you can take a sentence from that and put it in if you needed to. So.
Fabulous. And please, no questions are stupid. That's fine. Okay, are there any other questions? No? Okay. Well, we have some recommendations for this. We've got 3 recommendations, and I'm intending to deal with them in just one vote, but I'll read them out. So, recommendation A is to approve the content of the draft AGS, subjects to paragraphs 8.2 and 8.3, being updated with the head of external audit opinion and commentary on value for money when published. Recommendation B is to authorise the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive, the Chair of Avon Fire Authority and statutory officers to sign the approved statement. And finally, recommendation C is to approve the publication of the annual government statement 21-22 alongside the final statement of accounts when the external audit process is complete. So I'd like to propose that we accept those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Of course.
Will we get to see the updated paragraphs 8.2 and 8.3 at some point?
Yes, it will come back in the November AGEC as the final copy.
I think what 8.2 will come back in November and possibly a little later for the value for money one.
Yes, so final accounts and the narrative statement that supports that, plus final AGS will come back in November, and then value for money runs a little bit behind that for the external audit. So I imagine that will be the following AGEC, which I think is sort of February time.
Right.
Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, it just seems a little bit unusual to be approving it when it's not really complete.
I think we've had to do this before. It's because for our process to be completed in time, we have to have the document ready to go, and we're just waiting for that final text. We have had recommendations along these lines before, so this isn't the first time.
In my experience, I saw an audit in a case in South Gloss, and just because of timings, this is not unusual that you vote through the report, but with figures to be entered in when the audit is concluded. So I'm comfortable with the second recommendation.
Thank you. So that motion is seconded by Councillor Monk.
Yes, okay.
Are there any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes in favour? So that's unanimous and that's passed. Thank you very much.
The microphone. Now, what we might do for the November one is just provide you with the amended text rather than the full kind of document, which might be preferable to members as well.
Thanks, Angie. Agenda item 10 is just for information. It's the date of the next meeting. Don't know who our constituents will be exactly for that. It's the 22nd of November at 10:30 hours at the Seven Park Training Centre. So I'd like to move that we approve that as the date of the meeting. Can I have a seconder on that? Thank you, Councillor Monk again. Are there any votes against? Any abstentions and votes for? Brilliant, that's passed unanimously. Brilliant, so we'll move on to agenda item 11, which is the exclusion of the press and public. So I'd like to move that we resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business on the grounds that they contain exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, and that in accordance with Schedule 12A, Part 2, Paragraph 10 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So I'd like to propose that we do that now. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Payne, I saw your hand first. So any votes against? Any abstentions and votes in favour? Brilliant. That passed unanimously, and I'll now ask Mark to stop recording the meeting. Thank you.